design, create, communicate. I want that.
Last week, we explored the fundamentals of organizing a business from scratch and developing a comprehensive business plan. We heard from Sarah about her experience starting her bakery without proper planning and the costly lessons she learned over the 3 years of the struggle. This week, we're examining two alternative paths to business ownership that Sarah never seriously considered: buying an existing business and franchising. These aren't lesser options or shortcuts. They're legitimate strategic choices that offer different trade offs than starting from scratch. For many entrepreneurs, they're actually smarter choices than building from zero. Throughout the session, you'll continue to hear from Sarah as she reflects on what might have been different if she had explored these alternatives. You'll also hear at the end from David, another prospective entrepreneur who did buy an existing business and has his perspective on both paths. Their experiences will illustrate why understanding all of your options before committing to one is essential for making informed strategic decisions. Before we begin, let's review the assignment deadlines. Your week 5 assessment is due as indicated on the schedule. I've noticed that some students are falling behind, and I wanted to remind you that staying current is crucial not just for your grade, but for your learning. These concepts build on each other. If you skip material or delay engaging with it, you're going to struggle with it later. In entrepreneurship, staying on top of commitments isn't just good practice, it's survival. Customers don't accept excuses. Suppliers don't give extensions indefinitely. Banks foreclose when you miss payments, regardless of your reasons. Use this course as training ground for the discipline entrepreneurship requires. Let's start with buying an existing business, an alternative to starting a new venture from scratch. This is a common path for entrepreneurs seeking a faster way into entry into the business ownership because it allows immediate operation rather than the long setup period required when building from scratch. When you buy an existing business, you're acquiring something that already functions. Customers already come through the door, revenue is already flowing, employees already know their jobs. Systems have been in existence for the operations, accounting, inventory management, and the relationships with the suppliers and banks, an established presence in your community. This is fundamentally different from starting from scratch, where you build everything from zero. There's no setup period where you're paying expenses without generating revenue. There's no learning curve about whether your business model actually works because it's already working to some degree. There's no mystery about whether the customers exist because you can see them and talk to them before buying. Now, that doesn't mean buying is automatically better than starting from scratch. It means it's different with different advantages and different challenges, different capital requirements, and different risk profiles. The question isn't whether it's better universally. The question is it better for your specific situation, goals, resources, and your capabilities?
Looking back, I realize I never seriously considered buying an existing bakery, even though there were two for sale in Barrie when I was planning to open. One was owned by a couple approaching retirement who wanted out. The other was struggling financially, and the owner was desperate to sell. I dismissed both immediately without even investigating them. My reasoning seemed sound at the time. The retirement age owners wanted too much money. The struggling bakery was obviously failing for reasons I didn't understand, so why would I want to buy someone else's failure? I wanted to build my own bakery my way, not take over someone else's compromised operation. But I never actually investigated those opportunities properly. I never looked at their financial statements to see if the price was justified by the cash flow. I never analyzed why the struggling bakery was struggling and whether those problems were fixable. I never considered that buying either one would have given me established customer base, functioning equipment, trained staff, proven location, and immediate revenue. I chose to start from scratch by default, not by strategic analysis of alternatives. That decision cost me dearly.
Let's explore why entrepreneurs choose to buy existing businesses rather than starting from scratch or franchising. Understanding the motivations helps clarify when buying might be the right strategic choice. First, there's a strong desire to reduce uncertainty and startup risk. Starting from scratch involves enormous uncertainty. You don't know if your location will attract foot traffic. You don't know if your pricing will work. You don't know if customers will like your products enough to become regulars. You don't know if your operational systems will be efficient. You're making hundreds of assumptions, and many will be wrong. Buying an existing business significantly reduces this uncertainty because you can observe the actual performance and see the financial statements from the previous years, watch operations, and see how efficiently they function. You can talk to the customers and understand why they prioritize this business. Much of the guessing is replaced by observable data. And second, many entrepreneurs have strong preferences for existing customers and cash flow rather than building from zero. When you start from scratch, you spend months or even years building customer bases, while expenses exceed revenue. You're burning through capital, hoping you'll reach profitability before running out of money. That's stressful and risky. When you buy existing businesses, customers already come through the door and the revenue already flows. You might not be making a huge profit immediately, but you're typically at least covering the expenses and generating cash that can service the debt and use to purchase the business, etc. That provides financial stability that startups lack. Third, some entrepreneurs see opportunity to improve or expand an established operation rather than building from nothing. Maybe the business is doing okay, but you see an opportunity that the current owner hasn't pursued. Maybe they're not marketing effectively, or they're not leveraging digital channels, or they're missing product opportunities, or they could expand hours or locations. You see potential to take something that works, something to make it better. That's appealing because you're starting from a base of existing performance rather than starting from zero. These motivations don't apply to every entrepreneur. Some people want creative freedom of starting from scratch. Some enjoy building from nothing. Some don't want to deal with inherited problems. But for entrepreneurs who value reduced uncertainty, immediate cash flow, and improvement opportunities over creative freedom, buying existing businesses often makes sense strategically. Reduced startup time and faster revenue generation is perhaps the most obvious advantage. When you start from scratch, you typically need 3 to 6 months just to get operational. Finding locations, negotiating leases, obtaining permits, purchasing equipment, hiring staff, buying initial inventory, all before you generate $1 of revenue. During that entire period, you're paying rent, loan interest, insurance, and various expenses while producing nothing. When you buy an existing business, operations continue essentially uninterrupted. You close the purchase on Friday, you're running the business on Monday. Customers come in on Tuesday and pay you money. Revenue starts immediately rather than after 3 months of preparation. That makes enormous difference to cash flow and reduces capital requirements. Established customer bases and supplier relationships save you years of work. Building customer bases from zero is slow, expensive, and uncertain. You're spending heavily on marketing to attract trial and then working hard to convert trial into repeat customers. It takes most businesses 2 to 3 years to build an adequate customer base. When you buy an existing business, those customers already exist. They already have habits of coming here. They already trust the brand. Your job is to maintain those relationships and gradually improve them, not to create them from scratch. Similarly, supplier relationships already exist. The business has established credit terms, negotiated prices, and proven reliability. Suppliers know and trust this business. You inherit those advantages. Existing employees with operational knowledge is hugely valuable. When you start from scratch, you hire people with no knowledge of your specific operations. You train them from zero, and during that training period, mistakes are common. Efficiency is low and quality is inconsistent. When you buy an existing business, staff already know how operations work. They know the recipes or procedures or systems. They know the customers and the rhythms of the business. That institutional knowledge has enormous value if you can't retain good employees through this transition. Proven location and market presence means that you're not gambling on whether the customers are even going to find you. The business exists in a location where customers already come. You know the foot traffic patterns, the parking situation, the visibility, the accessibility, because you can observe them before buying. You're not hoping a new location works, you're buying a location that already works to some degree. Beyond the core advantages, several additional benefits make buying existing businesses more attractive for many entrepreneurs. Easier access to financing due to operating history is significant. Banks are inherently conservative. They prefer lending against proven cash flow rather than projections and hope. When you start from scratch, you're asking the banks to believe your projections about a business that doesn't exist yet. They're skeptical, and rightfully so, because most projections are optimistic and many startups fail. When you buy existing businesses with track records of profitability and cash flow, you're presenting historical financial statements showing actual performance. Banks can analyze those statements, assess risk based on real data, and make lending decisions with greater confidence. The result? Better loan terms, lower interest rates, higher loan to value ratios, sometimes less requirement for personal guarantees. The operating history makes the lending proposition less risky for the bank, which benefits you. Lower risk compared to untested startup ideas, though not zero risk, appeals to entrepreneurs who want business ownership but don't want to gamble everything on an unproven concept. Yes, you can still fail after buying an existing business. Maybe you manage poorly. Maybe the market conditions deteriorate. Key employees leave. But you're starting from a known base rather than complete uncertainty. You know what revenue looks like because you examine years of statements. You know what margins are typical because the business has operated. You know what customer traffic patterns exist because you can observe them. That knowledge reduces risk, even though it doesn't eliminate it. Opportunity to improve efficiency or reposition the brand attracts entrepreneurs with operational and marketing expertise. They look at existing businesses and see unrealized potential. Maybe operations are inefficient because the owner never invested in better systems. Maybe marketing is non existent because the owner relied on word of mouth. Maybe the brand positioning is confused, or maybe it's outdated. There are product opportunities that the owner never pursued. Entrepreneurs with relevant expertise can acquire businesses that they're doing okay and can transform them into something that's doing very well by applying capabilities that the previous owner lacked. That transformation potential creates value and makes the purchase an attractive investment.
Every single one of these advantages would have benefited me enormously. Reduced startup time? I spent 4 months getting my bakery ready to open, 4 months of rent and expenses with zero revenue. If I'd bought the existing bakery, I'd have been generating revenue from day one. Established customers? I struggled for 2 years to build adequate customer base. The existing bakery had customers walking in daily. Supplier relationships? I had to establish credit from zero and initially paid cash on delivery. The existing bakery had established credit terms and negotiated pricing. Employees with knowledge? I hired people and trained them in my methods, which took months and involved countless mistakes. The existing bakery had experienced bakers who knew operations. Proven location? I gambled on a location that seemed good, but turned out to have inadequate foot traffic. The existing bakery had proven its location worked. Access to financing? I paid premium interest rates because I was startup with no history. If I'd bought the existing bakery with its operating history, I would have gotten better loan terms. Lower risk? I lived in constant fear during my first 2 years that the business would fail. Buying existing would have started me from base of known performance. Every advantage on this list represents something I desperately needed but didn't have. I could have bought those advantages by purchasing existing business instead of trying to build everything from scratch.
Now, let's be equally honest about the disadvantages because they're real and they can be severe if you don't investigate thoroughly before buying. Hidden operational or financial problems are perhaps the most dangerous risk. Sellers have strong incentives to present their businesses in the best possible light and to hide or minimize the problems. They want maximum sale price, which means making everything look great. Maybe there's unresolved disputes with a major supplier. Maybe the key customer is planning to leave, or equipment that looks like it's functional is actually near the end of its useful life. Maybe there's a pending lawsuit that the seller hasn't disclosed. Financial statements have been manipulated to show better performance than actually exist. Maybe there's an environmental contamination issue that will cost huge money for you to remediate. These hidden problems only reveal themselves after you own the business. And by then, you're stuck with them. Due diligence helps discover problems, but it can't discover everything, especially if the seller is actively concealing issues. Outdated equipment or facilities can require major capital investment soon after purchase. Maybe the equipment functions currently, but it's old, inefficient, and it's going to need replacement soon. The facility needs renovation to meet the current standards or the customer expectations. The technology systems are antiquated and need upgrading, or the location needs to be remodeled to remain competitive. These investments can be substantial and they come on top of the purchase price. If you haven't budgeted for them, they can create a financial crisis immediately. Resistance to change from existing employees is common and can undermine your plans. Employees who've worked under the previous owner for years have established ways of doing things. They're comfortable with the current systems or procedures. When a new owner comes in wanting to change things, they resist. We've always done it this way becomes an excuse for not implementing your improvements. Some employees quit rather than adapt. Some will stay, but subtly sabotage changes, while others become sources of negativity that poison the culture. Managing this resistance requires skill, patience, and sometimes a willingness to replace people who won't adapt. Difficulty determining true business value creates risk of overpaying. Business valuation isn't a precise science. Sellers typically want the highest possible price. Buyers want the lowest possible price. The gap between the seller's price and the buyer's price can be enormous. Without expertise in business valuation, you risk paying far more for the business than it's actually worth. You might pay for goodwill that doesn't actually exist, or for an inflated financial statement, or you might pay for future earnings that never materialize. And overpaying means that you start with a debt load that the business can't service, creating financial pressure from day one. These disadvantages don't mean you shouldn't buy existing businesses. They mean you must investigate thoroughly, get professional help from accountants and lawyers, negotiate carefully, and structure the deal to protect yourself against hidden problems. Let's get specific about risk factors that you'd need to investigate carefully before purchasing any business. These are red flags that signal potential problems. Declining sales or market demand is a critical red flag. Review financial statements for the last 3 to 5 years. Is the revenue growing, flat, or declining? If it's declining, you have to figure out and understand why. Is it because the market is shrinking, or the competition is intensified, or because the owner just has stopped investing in marketing? Is it because the product or service has become less relevant? Declining sales might be a fixable issue if it's due to owner neglect, and you can reverse that. But if it's due to a fundamental market change, declining business might continue to decline no matter what you do. Customer concentration and dependency is a dangerous risk factor. Review customer lists thoroughly. What percentage of the revenue comes from the top 5 customers? Top 10? If 1 or 2 customers represent large percentages of revenue, you already have a concentration risk. What if they leave? What if they negotiate better terms? What if they go out of business? High customer concentration means your business is vulnerable to individual customer decisions. Investigate why customers buy from this business. Will they continue buying after ownership changes? Get commitments in writing if possible. The impact of COVID 19 or an economic shift requires careful analysis if you're buying businesses that are easily affected. How will this business perform during a pandemic? Did the revenue collapse? How is it recovered? Are current financial statements representative of the normal operations, or are they distorted by unusual circumstances? If the business benefited unusually from pandemic changes, will the benefit continue as things normalize? If the business suffered, has it truly recovered or is it still struggling? Understanding recent histories and current trajectory is essential. Overpaying for goodwill is a subtle trap that many buyers fall into. Goodwill is the difference between purchase price and the value of tangible assets. It represents the value of brand recognition, customer relationships, reputation, market position, all intangible things. Some goodwill value is legitimate, but sellers often want excessive goodwill premium that can't be justified by cash flow. If you pay too much goodwill, you're starting with debt load that business earnings are not going to be able to support. So calculate what goodwill premium you're paying and whether future cash flows can justify it. Investigate these factors systematically, though. Get professional help. Pay for thorough due diligence. It's far cheaper to discover problems before buying than discover them after when you're stuck with them.
The struggling bakery that was for sale when I was planning to open, I dismissed it immediately because it was obviously failing. Looking back, I never investigated why it was failing or whether those problems were fixable. Maybe it was failing because of poor management I could have improved. Maybe it was failing because of inadequate marketing I could have addressed. Maybe it was failing because the owner had health problems and couldn't maintain quality. These would have been fixable problems. Or maybe it was failing because the market wasn't there, or the location was terrible, or the equipment was junk, or the reputation was destroyed. These would have been unfixable problems that would have dragged me down too. I'll never know because I never investigated. I just assumed failing business was bad acquisition target without doing analysis to understand whether it represented opportunity or trap. That was lazy thinking on my part.
Where do you actually find businesses for sale, though? Let's explore the various sources because they require different approaches and offer different levels of information. Online listings such as Kijiji, Biz Buy Sell, and specialized business for sale websites are increasingly common sources. These platforms allow sellers to list businesses with descriptions, asking prices, basic financial information, and photos. The advantages for this: they're easy to search, there's lots of options, they're accessible from pretty much everywhere. Where the disadvantages are that there's limited verification, varying quality of information, need to filter through some of the unsuitable options, direct negotiation with sellers who may not be forthcoming about problems. Use these as starting points to identify possibilities, but verify everything independently. Real estate brokers specializing in commercial sales often handle business sales alongside property transactions. They typically represent the sellers, but can connect you with opportunities. They understand pricing, help navigate transactions, coordinate with lawyers and accountants, and the advantages are that you have a professional intermediary, access to off market opportunities, experience with deal structures. The disadvantages are that their loyalty is to the seller who pays them. Their commission depends on the highest possible price, and they may downplay problems. Work with them, but remember whose interests they primarily serve. Lawyers and accountants and bankers who work with the business owners often know about upcoming sales before they're publicly listed. Business owners planning to sell typically talk to advisors first. If you have relationships with professionals who work with businesses in your target industry, let them know you're interested in acquiring. They might connect you with opportunities before they reach the open market. And the advantages are obviously the access to deals before competition, Professional recommendation may give you credibility with the seller. The disadvantages are that there's limited opportunities that are dependent on relationships with no guarantee that the advisors will prioritize your interests. Now, word of mouth within an industry network can be a valuable source, but it requires you to be already connected to the industry. So attend industry conferences, join trade associations, participate in those industry events to build relationships with people in businesses similar to what you want to buy. Business owners planning to exit often mention their intentions to the industry colleagues. If you already are known, trusted, and that you're present, they might approach you differently. The advantages are potentially better prices because there's no brokers involved. There's an opportunity to build relationships with the seller before formal negotiation, and insider knowledge about business realities is essential. Consequently, the disadvantages are that it requires time to build the network, there's limited opportunities, and it's all dependent on timing. Once you've identified potential acquisition, thorough evaluation is essential. Let's work through the key areas that you have to assess systematically. Industry trends and competitive environment establish context for whether this business has a viable future. Is this industry growing? Is it stable or declining? What are the growth drivers or decline factors? How intense is the competition? Are new competitors entering? Are substitutes emerging? Is technology disrupting the business models or the regulation changing the ways that affect the industry? You've evaluated these through opportunity analysis last week, but now you're applying that analysis to specific existing businesses. If industry outlooks are poor, even well run businesses are going to struggle. If the industry is strong, even mediocre businesses might do okay. Reputation and motivations of the seller matter enormously, but they're difficult to assess objectively. Talk to the customers and suppliers and other business owners in the area. What's the business's reputation? Is it known for good quality, poor service, reliability, for cutting corners? Reputation affects whether the customers will continue patronizing after the ownership change. Also investigate sellers' motivations. Why are they selling? Retirement is straightforward and it's a low risk motivation. Health problems are understandable. Wanting to pursue different opportunities is reasonable. But if the seller is vague about why they're selling, or if their story doesn't make sense, dig deeper. They might know something about the business prospects that they're not disclosing. Accuracy and validity of financial statements is critical, but requires professional help to verify. Hire an accountant to review the financial statements very carefully. Compare revenue reported to tax returns and to bank deposits. They should match. If they don't, financial statements may be inflated. Examine expense categories for reasonableness. Compare it to industry benchmarks. Are costs in line with what similar businesses typically experience? Look for the missing expenses. Is the owner paying himself for a reasonable salary, or is he undercompensating himself to make profits look higher? Are all expenses being properly recorded, or might some be missing? Verify the major claims. If the seller says revenue is X, ask to see support documentation like sales records, merchant account statements, and customer contracts. The strength of customer-supplier relationships affect whether the business will continue functioning well after transition. Talk to major customers if possible. Will they continue buying after the ownership change? Are their purchases driven by the relationship with the current owner or by value proposition of the business itself? Talk to the suppliers. What are the payment terms? Is credit solid? Are there contracts that will continue? Are there exclusive arrangements? The suppliers, are they satisfied with the relationship? Strong relationships that transfer to a new owner are valuable. Relationships dependent on current owner's personal connections are extremely risky. This evaluation takes time and costs money for professional help, but it's essential. You're potentially committing hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars and years of your life. Invest the time and money to evaluate it thoroughly. Beyond financial statements and relationships, you need to physically assess the assets of the operation. This is where you discover whether what you're buying is actually valuable or if it's junk disguised as valuable. Condition of inventory and equipment and facilities requires a hands on inspection. Walk through the entire operation, examine the equipment carefully. Is it well maintained or is it neglected? Current or outdated? Is it adequate for the current production levels or is it now maxed out? Does it need replacement soon? These are all considerations that need to be thought of as you're making this purchase. Accounts receivable and payable liabilities tell you what cash you'll actually collect and what debts you're assuming. Review the accounts receivable aging report. How much do customers actually owe? How old are the receivables? Are they actually collectible or are some likely going to become bad debts? Will the customers pay the new owner or will they dispute the amounts? Review all liabilities carefully. What's owed to the suppliers, banks, taxing authorities, etc., the employees, landlords, everyone. Make sure you understand exactly what obligations you're assuming. Insist that some purchase price be held in escrow to cover any unexpected liabilities that may emerge after closing. And the quality of employees and management systems determines whether the operations will continue smoothly after the transition or whether you'll face chaos. Observe operations carefully. Are processes documented or does everything exist in a person's head? Are employees well trained or are they fumbling around? And is there supervision or is there quality control or is everyone just kind of doing whatever? Meet with those key employees. Will they stay after ownership change? What are the skill levels that they have? What are their compensation expectations? Completeness and reliability of business records affects your ability to verify everything that the seller claims. Ask to see the last 3 years of tax returns, financial statements, bank statements, sales records, etc. Do financial statements match the tax returns? Do the bank deposits match reported revenue? The expense categories, do they make sense? Look for gaps or discrepancies. If the records are disorganized or incomplete, that's a major red flag suggesting either poor management or potential concealment. This asset and operational evaluation is grunt work. It's tedious. It's time consuming, but it's 100% necessary. What you're buying is only valuable if it actually works and if the assets are actually sound. Verify everything. Now, we get to perhaps the most critical and most challenging question. What's this business actually worth? Business valuation isn't a precise science. It's part analysis, part negotiation, part judgment. So let's explore the main approaches. Market value based on buyer-seller agreement is ultimately what determines the price. Regardless of the valuation methods, businesses sell for what the buyer is willing to pay and what the seller is willing to accept. That number emerges through negotiation and is influenced by multiple factors beyond pure financial analysis. How motivated is the seller? How many potential buyers exist? How unique is the business? What alternatives does the buyer have? Market conditions, personal situations, negotiation skills all affect the final price, but you need to still be objective in your valuation methods to establish reasonable ranges of negotiation. Asset-based valuation methods look at what the business owns. Earnings-based valuation methods look at what the business generates in profit. Combination approaches use both. Different methods yield different values, sometimes dramatically different. Understanding all approaches helps you negotiate from position of knowledge rather than ignorance. The right approach depends on the business type and the situation. Asset-based methods work better for businesses where value is primarily in physical assets, manufacturing with expensive equipment, retail with significant inventory, real estate holding companies, etc. Earnings-based methods work better for service businesses where value is primarily in cash flow generated, consulting, software, professional services, etc. Most of these businesses benefit from looking at both approaches to establish the range. Let's explore these methods in detail over the next few slides because understanding valuation fundamentals is essential for any entrepreneur considering acquisition. Asset-based valuation starts with tangible assets and works towards a value. This establishes floor or ceiling based on perspective. Let's break down these methods. Book value is the simplest approach. Take the total assets as shown on the balance sheet, subtract the total liabilities, and what remains is book value or net worth. This is purely accounting numbers based on historical costs of assets minus the accumulated depreciation. An example of this is where businesses may have $300,000 in assets, $120,000 in liabilities. So the book value is $180,000. And the advantage is it's objective and it's easy to calculate from financial statements. Now, the disadvantage is that the book value often bears little relationship to actual market value because the assets are recorded at historical cost that might be far from what the current value is. Replacement value asks what it would cost to buy all the assets new at the current prices. Walk through the business, identify each and every significant asset, determine the current replacement cost, and add them up. Then adjust for condition and remaining useful life. An example would be equipment might cost $100,000 to replace new, but existing equipment is 5 years old and 60% through useful life, so adjust to $40,000. The advantage of this is it gives you a sense of what you're going to spend to create equivalent operations from scratch, where the disadvantage is it doesn't account for value of going concern, customer relationships, brand, or revenue streams. These asset-based approaches often establish the floor for negotiation. If businesses are generating good cash flow, it should sell for more than pure asset value because you're also buying customer base, revenue streams, and established operations. But if the business is losing money, pure asset value might actually be the ceiling because the buyer isn't willing to pay for negative earnings. Asset-based approaches work well for businesses that have stopped operating or they're failing. They work less for profitable organizations, going concerns, etc., where most of the value is in the earning power rather than the physical assets. Earnings-based valuation focuses on cash flow of the business that it generates because that's what determines whether you can service debt, pay yourself, and achieve a return on your investment. This is typically more relevant than asset value for profitable organizations. Capitalization of earnings divides expected annual earnings by expected rate of return to determine value. The formula is value equals the earnings divided by capitalization rate. An example, a business generates $60,000, say, in annual profit. A buyer expects 20% return on investment. The value equals 60,000 divided by 0.2, which equals 300,000. The logic is at 300,000 purchase price, $60,000 of annual earnings represents 20% return. The advantages are that it directly relates to the value of earning potential and incorporates the buyer's return requirements. Some of the challenges would be determining correct earnings figure. Should you use the last year, average of several years, adjusted for unusual items, and determining the appropriate capitalization rate. Higher risk requires higher return, which lowers the value. Times earnings approach uses industry multiples. Small businesses typically sell for 2 to 5 times annual earnings, depending on what the industry stability and prospects are. Service businesses with few assets might be 2 to 3 times. Manufacturing with significant equipment might be 4 to 5 times. Technology businesses with high growth might be 6 to 8 times or higher. Let's say, for example, a business generates $80,000 in annual profit. The industry multiple is 3. The value is approximately $240,000. The advantage is that it's simple and it's based on market norms. And the disadvantage is that the industry multiples are rough guidelines. They're not precise measures, and every business is unique. Both approaches require determining true earnings, which requires adjustments. Remove the owner's excessive salary and substitute market salary for a manager. Remove personal expenses run through the business. Remove one time unusual expenses and add back depreciation since it's a non cash expense. Adjust for those inventory or accounting method changes. The goal is to determine what sustainable earnings are under the normal operations with professional management. Earnings based approaches typically yield higher values than asset based approaches for profitable businesses because you're paying for the income stream, not just the physical assets. This is usually appropriate because that's what you're really buying, the right to future cash flows.
When I finally had my business appraised 3 years in to see what it was worth, the contrast between asset and earnings approaches was stark. Asset value was maybe $65,000. My equipment at current value, my inventory, my leasehold improvements, that was essentially what I could sell everything for if I liquidated. But earnings value was harder to determine because my earnings were marginal. I was making maybe $35,000 profit annually after paying myself reasonable salary. Using times earnings multiple of 3, my business was worth only about $100,000 despite me having invested over $120,000 in it. I'd lost money on the investment. If I'd bought an existing bakery that was generating $60,000 profit, even at 4 times multiple, that would have been $240,000 purchase price. But I would have had immediate cash flow to service the debt and pay myself. Instead, I invested $120,000 building from scratch, struggled for 3 years to barely break even, and ended up with business worth less than my investment. The comparison was depressing but instructive. Buying existing profitable business often makes more financial sense than building from scratch.
Once you've completed the evaluation and determined the value range that you consider reasonable, negotiation begins. This is where professional help becomes critical. Buyers should establish maximum acceptable price before entering into negotiations. Based on your valuation analysis, determine absolute highest price that you're willing to pay. Then determine your opening offer, which should be significantly below your maximum to leave room for negotiation. Don't fall in love with the deal. Being willing to walk away if the price exceeds your maximum or if the seller won't negotiate reasonably. Remember, there's always other businesses available. Don't let emotional attachment to specific opportunity cause you to overpay. Professional support from lawyers and accountants is not optional, it's essential. The lawyer reviews and negotiates purchase agreements, ensure that your interests are protected. They'll structure the deal to minimize your risk, including escrow provisions for undisclosed liabilities, non compete agreements, preventing the seller from starting a competing business, transition assistance requirements, ensuring that the seller helps with the transition. The accountant verifies the financial statements and helps structure the deal tax efficiently and identifies accounting issues that need resolution. These professionals cost money, but they save far more than they cost by preventing problems and negotiating better terms. Performance based agreements reduce the risk by tying some payment to the future performance. Rather than paying the entire purchase price up front, structure the deal so portion depends on the business achieving certain metrics. For example, pay $200,000 at closing, then pay an additional $50,000 if the revenue remains above a certain threshold in the next year, or pay $180,000 at closing, then pay $70,000 in earnout over the 3 years based on profitability. The seller has incentive to be honest about the business prospects because their additional payment depends on the business performing as represented. You reduce risk because if your business doesn't perform, you pay less. Not all sellers accept performance-based terms, but it's worth proposing, especially if you have concerns about the financial statements or the future prospects. Negotiation is as much of an art as it is a science. Be prepared to walk away. Get everything in writing. Don't trust verbal assurances. Verify everything the seller claims and take your time. Rushing into a deal because you're excited or because the seller is pressuring you leads to expensive mistakes. Now, let's shift to franchising, a completely different business model based on licensing a proven system. Franchising represents a third path to business ownership alongside starting from scratch and buying an existing business. Franchising is a business arrangement where the franchisor, the company that developed the business system, grants the franchisee, you, the individual operator, the right to use their brand, systems, and processes in exchange for upfront franchise fees and ongoing royalty payments. The franchise operates under the established brand following proven operational procedures with support from the franchisor. Think of it as buying a business system in a box. Franchisors provide the brand, the marketing, the operational procedures, the training, the ongoing support, etc. You provide the capital, the labor, the local market knowledge, and the execution. If done well, it combines best aspects of starting from scratch with the best aspects of buying an existing business, that proven system and immediate brand recognition. The franchisors expand using franchisee capital rather than corporate capital. This is key to understanding franchising economics. If the franchisor wanted to open 100 locations using corporate capital, they'd need enormous investment and take significant risk. Instead, they recruit 100 franchisees who each invest their own capital to open locations. The franchisor gets an expansion without capital investment, and the franchisees get a proven system and brand support. When done properly, both will benefit. But not all franchises are created equal. Quality varies enormously from excellent systems that provide real value to franchisees to mediocre systems that benefit the franchisor more than the franchisees to outright scams that exploit naive and would-be business owners. Understanding franchising deeply is essential before committing hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of your life to franchise opportunities. Canada is one of the largest franchise markets globally with sophisticated franchise sectors and strong legal frameworks protecting the franchisees. So let's put this in context with some numbers. There are tens of thousands of franchise units operating nationwide across every business category you can imagine, from fast food to coffee shops to fitness centers to home services to automotive services to retail stores to professional services. Franchising touches nearly every sector. Major Canadian cities have franchise density similar to the United States, with opportunities available in markets of all sizes. Franchising is a major contributor to employment and retail sales in the Canadian economy. Franchise businesses employ hundreds of thousands of Canadians. They represent significant percentages of retail sales in many different categories. All you have to do is walk down any commercial street in any Canadian city and you'll see franchises. Tim Hortons, McDonald's, Subway, Boston Pizza, M&M, Midas, Mr. Lube, and hundreds of others. Franchising is a mainstream business model, not niche or alternative approach. Several factors make Canada a strong franchise market. Relatively affluent population provides the customer base. Stable business environment provides predictability. Legal protections through provincial franchise legislation in Ontario, Alberta, and other provinces provide transparency and fairness. Geographic size creates the need for the multi-location expansion models that franchising serves well. For entrepreneurs, this means abundant opportunities, but significant competition. Franchise opportunities exist at all investment levels from under $100,000 to over $1 million. In virtually any industry you're interested in, franchises exist. But abundance of option doesn't mean all are good. Careful evaluation is still essential. Franchising isn't monolithic. Different franchise types have very different economics. operational models, and investor requirements. Understanding distinctions helps you evaluate whether specific franchise opportunities fit your situation. Manufacturer direct franchises are where manufacturers grant the franchisee the right to sell products using the manufacturer's name and their systems. Car manufacturers like Ford or Toyota grant franchises to dealers who sell their vehicles under the manufacturer brand with manufacturer support. Dealers invest heavily in facilities meeting manufacturer specifications. They follow manufacturer pricing and promotion programs. So they receive inventory allocation and marketing support. These franchises typically require enormous capitals in the millions and generate revenue primarily from product sales with lower margins than service franchises. Wholesaler retailer franchises are where the wholesaler grants the franchisee the right to sell products using the wholesaler brand and receiving inventory direct from the wholesaler. The franchisee operates retail locations selling the products supplied by the wholesaler under the wholesaler brand. This provides the purchasing power and the brand recognition. Capital requirements vary widely depending on the scale. Margins are retail margins, which can be thin in competitive categories. Franchise company business formatted franchises are what people typically think of as franchising. This is where the franchisor has developed complete business systems, including brand, products, operational procedures, training, marketing, and support, then licenses the entire system to franchisees. For example, Tim Hortons or McDonald's, Anytime Fitness, Midas, etc. The franchisee operates independent businesses following the franchisor's detailed procedures and standards. This is the dominant franchise type and what we'll focus on primarily. Business format franchises vary enormously on investment requirements, operational complexity, profit potential, and support quality. Understanding specific franchises deeply are essential before investing. For franchisees, franchising offers several compelling advantages that explain why hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs choose this path rather than starting from scratch or buying existing independent businesses. Established brand recognition means customers already know and trust the name before you open. When you start independent businesses, nobody knows who you are. Building brand awareness takes years and significant marketing investment. When you open a franchise location, customers already recognize the brand. They already have expectations about what you can offer and what quality to expect. That instant recognition drives traffic from day one. Tim Hortons franchisee doesn't need to convince Canadians to trust their coffee. Brand recognition already exists. Their job is execution, not brand building. Training and operational support from the franchisor reduces learning curves and improves execution. Most entrepreneurs starting from scratch make countless operational mistakes because they're just learning as they go. Franchisors provide the comprehensive initial training, teaching you proven systems. They provide operations manuals detailing exactly how you do everything. They provide ongoing support when you encounter problems. Field representatives visit regularly to help optimize performance. Many provide annual conferences where the franchisees share the best practices. This support accelerates your learning and helps you avoid common mistakes. Standardized systems and processes mean that you're following proven playbooks rather than inventing everything yourself as you go. Franchise operations manuals can be hundreds of pages detailing every aspect of operations, how to open and close, how to prepare products, how to hire and train staff, how to maintain equipment, handle customer complaints, absolutely everything. These systems have been refined across dozens or hundreds of locations. They represent accumulated learning that would take you years to develop independently. Following them provides consistency and efficiency. Marketing and purchasing power come from being part of the larger system. Individual small businesses can't afford sophisticated marketing or negotiate favorable supplier terms. Franchisors conduct national advertising campaigns that individual franchisees simply couldn't fund. They negotiate volume discounts with suppliers that reduce your costs. They develop marketing materials and promotions that you can implement locally. You get the marketing and purchasing clout you'd never achieve as an independent operator. These advantages are real and valuable. They explain why the franchise failure rates are lower than independent business failure rates, but advantages come with trade offs we need to explore.
I looked at bakery franchises very briefly when I was planning, but I dismissed them almost immediately because I didn't want someone else telling me what to do. I wanted creative freedom to develop my own recipes, my own brand, my own way of doing things. The franchise model felt constraining, but I never seriously evaluated what I'd be getting in exchange for that constraint. Several Canadian bakery franchises existed that I could have investigated: Cobb's Bread, Ace Bakery, others. They had proven systems, established brands, training programs, operational support, marketing power, purchasing discounts. If I'd franchised, I'd have given up creative control over recipes and brand positioning. But I'd have gotten immediate brand recognition, systematic training and business management, which I desperately needed, ongoing operational support, proven systems that work, and marketing power I couldn't achieve independently. I valued creative freedom so highly that I never properly evaluated whether that freedom was worth 3 years of struggle. In retrospect, some constraints in exchange for support and proven systems might have been wise trade-off, at least while I was learning the business side. I could have always opened independent bakery later after learning through franchise experience.
The advantages are compelling, but franchising disadvantages are equally significant and lead some entrepreneurs to reject franchising entirely despite its benefits. Let's be honest about what you're giving up: limited independence and control of fundamental trade off in franchising. When you franchise, you're agreeing to operate according to the franchisor's systems and standards. You can't change menu items without approval. You can't alter the store layout or decor. You can't choose different suppliers or set your own prices in many systems. You can't experiment with new products or close when you want to close or expand your hours without formal approval. You're the operator, not the owner in traditional sense. For entrepreneurs who value creative freedom and independence, this constraint can be suffocating. For entrepreneurs who value support and proven systems, it's an acceptable trade off. Initial franchise fees and ongoing royalties permanently reduce your profit margins. Initial franchise fees, typically $25,000 to $100,000 depending on the brand, is a one-time cost for the right to use the system. That's capital you've got to raise before you even build a location. Ongoing royalties, typically 4 to 8% of gross revenue, come off the top forever. In businesses with 10% net margins, 5% of a royalty reduces your net margin to 5%, cutting your profit in half. Over the life of the business, royalties can total hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Some entrepreneurs feel this is worth it for the support and the brand value, and others feel that they're paying forever for something they could have developed independently. Contractual restrictions and obligations create legal constraints that you can't easily escape. Franchise agreements heavily favor franchisors. They typically last 10 to 20 years, but can be terminated by the franchisor for violations, while the franchisee can't terminate early without the penalties. They can include non compete clauses preventing you from operating competing businesses for years after leaving the system. They require specific standards for facilities, equipment, inventory, and staffing. They mandate participation in marketing programs and specific system changes. They include arbitration clauses limiting your legal recourse. Reading franchise agreements carefully with lawyers before signing is absolutely essential, because once it's signed, you're bound by those terms that heavily favor the franchisor. Market saturation risks occur when the franchisor opens competing locations too close to yours. Franchise territories are supposed to protect the franchisees from internal competition, but territory definitions vary. Some provide exclusive territory, others provide territory where the franchisor won't open corporate locations but can grant other franchises. Others provide minimal protection. If the franchisor oversaturates a market with locations, they benefit from increased royalties and brand presence, while the individual franchisees cannibalize each other's sales. Your success depends on the franchisor making good decisions about market density, and their incentives don't always align with yours. These disadvantages don't mean franchising is a bad choice, they mean it's not the right choice for everyone. Entrepreneurs who value support, proven systems, and reduce risk often find franchising's trade offs acceptable. If franchising interests you, thorough evaluation of specific opportunity is absolutely essential. Not all franchises are created equal. Some are excellent opportunities, some are mediocre, some are outright scams. How can you tell the difference? Analyze the fit with your personal goals and lifestyle being the first consideration. Are you comfortable following someone else's systems? Can you subordinate your creative preferences to operational standards? And are you willing to pay ongoing royalties for support and brand value? Franchising isn't right for everyone psychologically. Be honest about whether the model fits who you are and what you want. Financial requirements and risk tolerance need careful assessment. Can you afford the initial franchise fee plus build out costs plus working capital? Most franchises require 200,000 to 500,000 total investment, though some are less and some are much more. Where will the capital come from? How much debt are you comfortable carrying? What return do you need on invested capital? Review the franchisor's financial performance representations carefully. What do existing franchisees actually earn? Not the best performers, average performers. Can you achieve financial goals on those realistic performances? The strength of the franchisor system separates good franchises from mediocre ones. What training do they provide? Initial training plus ongoing? What are the operational support systems that exist? Do franchisees collaborate and support each other? Are there franchisee associations? Research this thoroughly by talking to existing franchisees. Feedback from existing franchisees is the most valuable information source. Franchise disclosure documents that are required in Ontario and Alberta and other provinces have to include contact information for all franchisees. Call them, visit their locations, ask about their experience if they're satisfied, what surprised them, what was it better than expected, was it worse, etc. Talk to at least 10 franchisees, including some who have been operating for 5+ years. Their candid feedback is worth more than the franchisor's marketing materials. Also, research the franchisor itself. How long have they been franchising? How many units do they have in existence? What's their growth trajectory? How stable is their management? Checking the franchise registry databases, Better Business Bureaus, online franchise forms is significant. And look for the red flags that like rapid turnover and high closure rates and franchisee complaints, etc. This evaluation, it does take some time, but you're potentially committing hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of your life. Invest the time to evaluate properly before committing. We've covered enormous amounts of material about buying existing businesses and franchising. Let me distill them for the essential lessons. Takeaway number one: buying and franchising reduce startup uncertainty. Both buying existing businesses and franchising offer significant advantages over starting them from scratch, primarily by reducing the uncertainty and providing the established foundations. When you buy an existing business, you're acquiring proven operations, established customers, and functional systems known as cash flow. When you franchise, you're licensing proven systems, established brands, comprehensive training, ongoing support. Neither guarantees success, but both dramatically reduce the uncertainty and the learning curve that makes starting from scratch so risky. These aren't lesser choices than starting from scratch. They're legitimate strategic alternatives that often make more sense depending on your situation. If you lack business management experience, franchising's training and the support might be valuable. If you have experience but want faster entry, buying existing might be smarter than building from zero. Don't default to starting from scratch without systematically evaluating all three options. Whether buying existing businesses or evaluating franchise opportunities, thorough evaluation is not optional, it's essential. Hidden problems can destroy your investment. Overpaying creates financial burdens that you can't overcome. Joining weak franchise systems provides limited value despite your investment. Due diligence costs money, takes time, but it prevents more expensive mistakes. The common thread through all of this is making informed choices rather than emotional decisions or default selections. You have options: start from scratch, buy existing, franchise. Each has advantages, disadvantages, capital requirements, risk profiles. The right choice depends on your specific situation, goals, resources, capabilities, and preferences. Evaluate the options systematically. Compare the trade offs objectively. Don't start from scratch because it seems romantic or because you didn't realize you had alternatives. Don't buy existing businesses because you're impatient unless you've verified it's actually a good investment. Don't franchise because marketing materials make it look easy, unless, of course, you've thoroughly researched the opportunity. Make deliberate, informed, strategic choices.
If I could go back and advise my younger self planning to open that bakery, I'd tell her to stop, slow down, and systematically evaluate all three paths before defaulting to starting from scratch. I'd tell her to seriously investigate those two existing bakeries for sale, hire accountant to review their financials, hire business valuator to determine fair price, understand exactly why one was struggling and whether problems were fixable, negotiate with the retiring owners. Maybe one of those represented genuine opportunity I dismissed too quickly. I'd tell her to thoroughly research bakery franchises, request franchise disclosure documents, talk to franchisees, visit franchise locations, calculate realistic returns, understand exactly what she'd get for ongoing royalties. Maybe franchise support and proven systems would have been worth giving up creative control, at least initially while learning business management. I'd tell her to run the numbers honestly. Compare financial projections for all three paths, starting from scratch with my optimistic projections, buying existing with actual historical financial statements, franchising with Item 19 financial performance representations. Which path offers best risk-adjusted returns? I'd tell her that creative freedom and independence are valuable, but they're not worth 3 years of struggle and significant financial loss. Sometimes accepting constraints in exchange for support and proven systems is wiser choice. Most importantly, I'd tell her that the decision of how to enter business ownership is strategic choice, not default. Evaluate systematically. Choose deliberately. Don't let pride or impatience or romantic notions override rational analysis. Would I have bought existing bakery or franchised if I'd done proper evaluation? I honestly don't know. Maybe the analysis would have confirmed starting from scratch was right choice for me. But at least it would have been informed choice based on thorough evaluation rather than emotional default based on limited thinking. That's what I want you to take from my story. Don't do what I did. Don't default. Don't assume. Evaluate comprehensively and choose strategically. Whatever path you choose, make it deliberate choice based on analysis, not accident based on ignorance.
I'm David. I bought an existing printing business 6 years ago. I'd worked in printing for 15 years, but didn't have capital to burn through 2 years of startup losses like Sarah did. I evaluated 11 businesses over 8 months, made offers on 3, walked away from 2 during due diligence when I found problems, bought the third for $360,000. It was doing $800,000 revenue with $120,000 profit. I had revenue from day one, had customers, had trained employees, had supplier relationships. Were there challenges? Yes, Equipment needed replacement sooner than expected. Lost a major customer. 2 employees quit. Cost me about $40,000 in surprises. But compare that to Sarah spending 4 months with 0 revenue, projecting $300,000 and hitting $145,000, struggling for years to build what I inherited. 6 years later, I'm at $1.2 million revenue with $185,000 profit. That foundation saved me 2 to 3 years and probably $100,000 compared to starting from scratch. The lesson? Starting from scratch isn't a badge of honor. It's one option among 3. Evaluate objectively. Walk away during due diligence if you find problems. Get professional help from lawyers and accountants. And remember that your path affects your starting point, but execution determines your destination. Choose strategically, not emotionally. That's what entrepreneurial success requires.
Design, create, communicate. I want that.